So welcome everybody. This is the third Cultuur Café talk, where we're going to be talking about language learning tips from experts. I'm really excited. I think today's event is going to be awesome. So we have great speakers today. Carlos, are you there?
Hi, Glau. Hi, everybody. Welcome here. Welcome to our new edition. We are really excited to have you here, and I'm very excited to hear about this interesting points of view of persons that are experts in languages and idioms, and they want to be polyglots. very famous polyglots.
Yes, so let's present our speakers. We have Richard Simcott, Yvonne Fager, Anya Spilker, and Matt. Matt is becoming our wild card.
Yes,
As we see in Mexico, he is el ajonjolí de todos los moles. For those of you who don't speak English, that means that he's a fixed asset in our events. So, Richard, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure. Thank you very much for inviting me, first of all. It's a pleasure to be with you online, as it was when I was in person in Mexico City at the start of the year. So my name's Richard. I'm originally from the United Kingdom. I've been living in the Balkans for over a decade now, and I have been studying languages since I was very, very young in my lifetime. It's not to say that I speak 50 fluently. I never say that. But I have studied a lot of languages, and I continue studying languages. I run a Facebook group and some social media channels called Speaking Fluently, where I talk about language learning and talk about from my point of view how I do it, what I do, and I go live every Thursday at the moment. And then I also have a conference called the Polyglot Conference, which was due to go to Mexico this year. And now we're going to be looking forward to seeing you in 2021, thanks to Corona. And I've been doing that since 2013. And it's a conference that brings together academics, language lovers, and also people who work in languages, all under one roof to talk about topics that are important in terms of languages. And it's an event that's available and welcoming to anybody who loves language, whether you're learning your first language or your 31st language. Everyone's welcome. All you need to do is love languages and come with a smile, and that's it.
Very cool.
That's perfect. Thank you, Richard. We're going to have a section at the end where you can tell us more about the Polyglot Conference and your projects. Who else? Yvonne.
Hi. I'm Yvonne. I'm from Austria, Vienna, and I've been living abroad for about 10 years. I've been living in the US for some years, and now I've been living in Mexico for about 6 years. And I didn't speak a word of Spanish when I got here, but I'm coming from education and cultural studies, so I've been kind of that switch back to like being a student from being on the teacher's side taught me a lot, and I started, I wouldn't say to criticize, but I started to question traditional language teaching formats a lot since I've started to learn Spanish at a late time. I don't know if a late time, but like after my 30s. And there's a lot of information out there of how children learn languages, but I do feel like research is is not so much focusing on adult learners in that sense. And I've been started to like do my own investigation about how we learn and what is missing in traditional education. And that brought me to my current project, which is a theater and language school. And I guess we'll talk about that later.
Yes, we'll get to talk about that later. Carlos, who else do we have today?
Anja, how are you? How are you doing? Tell
Hi.
us about you.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Anya. Thanks again for the invitation. It's really nice to talk to you online after having seen some of you in Mexico City. So my name is Anya, born and raised in Germany. I actually left in 2007. Lived in different countries. I basically always chose the countries to improve or to learn the languages of the countries. And in 2014, I moved to Cholula, Mexico. Puebla, for those who don't know Mexico very well, Cholula is a beautiful, magical town in the state of Puebla, about 2 hours from Mexico City. And so I live here since 2014. I started my own language institute here with my awesome team. The institute is called Zaloa Languages. And in my personal language learning process, I decided about maybe 2 years ago to start learning Nahuatl. I took a break from Nahuatl.
Wow.
Yeah, I took a break from it about I don't know, it was maybe a year and a half ago. I took a break, and then since last year, I do that more or less intensively with several classes per week. And I actually decided that I want to learn more indigenous languages from Mexico. So I really want to focus on that the next years.
Very cool.
That's amazing. I didn't know that about you.
And finally, we have Matthew. Matthew, it's a pleasure to have you here again.
Thank you so much.
El ajonjolí de todos los moles.
My really good friend Christina from Mexico City. Yes, exactly. And everyone else I've had the opportunity to speak with and share stories with and learn from you guys as well. It's been amazing. I'm from Texas in the United States. I've got a beautiful wife and son. My son is 4 years old, and he can already speak Spanish. He went to Spanish school for a couple years. Obviously now it's not going to school, but we still practice. And my wife and I have a beautiful baby coming along the way too.
Oh,
and
yeah,
thank you so much. And my son actually has learned a lot too. He knows basic greetings in other languages too that I speak, you know, so it's good to be able to influence him this way. I started when I was 32, really learning languages. Early on in life, in middle school, I took French. In high school, I took Spanish. And a long time ago at a community college, I took Chinese, but I never really learned how to even use the language or how to communicate effectively. And I gave up. And then when I was 32 years old, I'm 38 now, I had a severe accident in judo, the martial arts.
Okay.
I was thrown head first into the mat and had a contusion to my spine. And so I couldn't do anything with my body for like an entire year. I was extremely depressed. And then I think by fate or by luck, I was on YouTube, and I know all the polyglots probably know him, and maybe a lot of people know him, but I came across a YouTube video of this guy named Benny the Irish Polyglot. And I saw what he was doing, and it inspired me. I was like, well, I can't use my body, so I'll use my mind and start strengthening my mind. And so I started off with Spanish first, and it grew from there. Once I began to have confidence that I could speak the language, I went into other languages and now speak 7 different languages that, you know, best to worst. I'd say the worst being maybe Russian and Arabic. But something that I tell people a lot of times is that this has been a passion of mine. And then that passion turned into something that I never even imagined, that now I've been using Spanish to work with clients from Mexico, because my wife and I have our own real estate business. And so it really took on a life of its own. So I think that when you have a great passion like this, especially with languages, you can create so much more opportunity than you could ever imagine, and connect with people from all parts of the world. For me personally, languages has been something like a treasure that just keeps giving, where I've learned about people's culture, their history, without going too deep, politics as well. But I've learned so much from people in other countries that I feel like language is the best method to really grow as a human being. So sorry for the long-winded explanation, but yeah,
you'll get to tell us more about this in a
Absolutely.
few minutes. Now Carlos is going to tell us the program for today.
Yeah, I'm going to explain again the program for this day. It's important to let you know that your participation is essential. In the first part, we are going to ask 2 or 3 questions to the speakers. In the second part, we are going to assign each of you in a mini room where you can interact together, make questions in order to have an interesting talk. And now the rules, we have rules. These are the general rules.
We have rules, and they are pretty important, even if you don't believe it. This is supposed to be an interactive event. This should not be a presentation, it should be a conversation. Just for the first minutes, please just let the speakers tell us their opinions, and then in the second part, you'll get to interact. No judgments, there are no rights or wrongs, there are only perspectives. And this is pretty important because we've had in a previous event a guy who told us we should not speak in English, and I had to tell him, well, this is a global event and that's why we're using English, so people in Egypt and in different parts of the world can understand us.
Yeah.
And remember that we want to learn more about different topics. Okay, so now I'm going to take off the presentation and we're going to start with the questions. Perfect. So let's begin with the panel. The first question, well, you have already told us a bit about this, but now we want to go a little bit deeper. And the first question is pretty easy. How did you start learning languages? So we are going to ask this first to Yvonne.
Hi. So I actually started learning languages in school. I am in Austria. I went to a Jewish kindergarten and high school, middle school, whatever. The full spectrum of 12 years in schooling and kindergarten. And we did start learning Hebrew actually very early on, more through songs and holidays and prayers and I'd say like a very inclusive way of starting to learn a language. And then I started learning English when I was 9 years old in last grade of primary school. And so I didn't go to dual-lingual school, like the focus was not the same on English, Hebrew, and German. German was the main language, and then we had a few hours of Hebrew and English, and I had to graduate in English and in Hebrew. There were, I'd say when I was 18 and I graduated from high school, I had low intermediate level in English and in Hebrew, but I haven't used Hebrew in about 20 years, so it's not the same anymore. And also, like in many traditional education settings, there was a strong focus on reading and writing, and not so much on speaking, and even less on like your corporal connection to the language. So what happened with my Hebrew was that I was very shy always, and I didn't really know how to communicate. I was very aware of my accent and very kind of stressed out when I had to open my mouth. And a bunch of visits to Israel didn't help that too much. I never really learned how to speak. And with my English, it was a little bit different because we learned it later on, and maybe it was, I had a different relationship to English because it was a more useful language to me. But I didn't like to speak in English. Like I had a lot of friends that went to American or English speaking schools that were communicating a lot in English in their everyday life, and I never joined. Like I understood everything, but I always replied in German, because obviously they all spoke German as well. And then only when I moved to the US for grad school, my English really kind of, my level of English changed a lot, and I became more fluent, and I became more aware of my limits also. Like there is a big difference to write an email, and you can take 2 hours to write a midterm exam in 40 minutes. And my first midterm exam had no connecting words. It was just like one sentence after the other without any connectors. And so it was a great learning experience. And it was actually the first time that I became more aware of the needs and necessities to actually really become fluent in a language and to master it. And that there is a big difference between being able to communicate and ask for a coffee or have a nice conversation in a level of small talk, but then also there's a big difference to like bring an argument or make a point in a language. And then another language I've learned, which I should have maybe said in the beginning, is Hungarian, because my family is from Hungary. But I never really, it never really kicked off. Like my grandmother was talking to us in Hungarian until we were, I'd say about 4 or 5 years old. But we started replying in German. And as she knew German, eventually she gave up and she started to speak in German to us, but she continued to speak in Hungarian with my mom. So up until today, I have like a household Hungarian, let's call it. Like I understand when we speak about food and about homework and about kids, maybe like general duties in a family setting, but then everything that is beyond that spectrum in Hungarian is like a lost case for me. And it's
probably
even more,
sorry, probably you'll understand Szeretek itt Lenin.
No.
I don't.
I have some Hungarian friends, so I know a few phrases.
A few phrases. No, and Hungarian is like something, and that's what I want to end with. Like the languages are very much connected to personal topics and to your identity. Like my father, who left Hungary with 9 years as a refugee and came to Austria. He never wanted to speak Hungarian again because he wanted to kind of make this switch of like kind of a new life, a new language. And his distance to Hungarian was what made me and my sister not wanting to learn it, because although my mom and my grandmother spoke Hungarian, like we kind of went with my father a little bit of not feeling attached to that language or not wanting to be attached to it. And I think even though it was a very unconscious decision as a small child, like it had a lot of effect, like the emotional relationship of my father with the language for like in our motivation to learn it. So that just kind of to wrap up is that I think all these experiences brought me to think that identity, intimacy, and the body are 3 topics that are very important to language learning and that are very much ignored in traditional teaching.
I think you're right.
Thank you, Yvonne. Then we want to know more about Anja. How did you start learning languages?
Okay, unmute the microphone. So I think my journey is a little different because I basically like never studied languages in university, because I don't know, I always felt like I have a lot of interests. So what I did is that I studied other topics in university, but I always moved to countries to study in my target language, to improve that target language through the studies as well. And I think I started learning, really focusing on languages because when I was 17, I moved to France and went to high school there. And I realized through that, because my French became, well, I had a very high level back then at the age of 17, and I made really, really good friends in France. And I think this connects with people, reason, the why I decided that I want to learn more languages. And so basically for me, it's the three reasons why I really started then focusing on languages in my life. Because first of all, I could connect with people, and it's different when you talk to them in their native language. That's also one of the reasons why I want to learn Nahuatl and other indigenous languages in Mexico, because I love this country and because I live here for 6 years now, and because I want to connect with the people, basically. And I know that it would be different doing that in Spanish, for example. So that's one reason, the connection with the people. And then the second reason, I think, is also, and maybe you know that when you learn a language, it's also this process of growing. You start feeling more confident in general in life. So this growing process was something that I really enjoyed. And then the third part is also because whenever I talk to people who had different mother tongues, they were always curious about my mother tongue as well. And I, thanks to that, I realized how much I enjoy also talking in general about languages and helping others learning my mother tongue, which is German, and then also other languages, but I focus a lot on German right now. So these were the three topics, and then this is how my language journey basically started, through the connection with people. And I think it's still the main reason why I continue learning languages. It's not to add another language. It's really because I want to have those connections, and deep connections as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Anya. Richard, I'm really interested in your answer to this question. How did you start? We can't hear you, Richard.
There we go. Is that better?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. Some technical difficulties connecting the audio, but here we are. So yes, thank you for asking. So for me, languages really started as a journey when I was very young. I used to listen to people with different accents. I grew up in the UK, and in the UK we have a very, very different accents, even within short distances of where I grew up. And so I used to hear these all the time, and I used to like to imitate them. And I found it interesting how different words would be used, different dialects. Sometimes the grammar would be different as well from one dialect to the next. And I think that's really what started to really make me interested in languages. I'm of English and Welsh heritage. So my Welsh side, actually, we went through what many indigenous groups around the world will recognise, that our language was not valued as a valid language. It was a minority language. It was a small language that was seen as actually disadvantaged to speak for those generations, a few generations back. And in fact, that was the case for my grandmother and her parents. They stopped using Welsh because they saw it as a disadvantage in the UK to speak Welsh. And so the family ended up with just English. So we ended up becoming a monolingual family. And I'm sure many people in Mexico will also be able to identify with me in that. And that was something that I was very conscious of, that we had this other language and we didn't use it anymore as a family. And so I always had an interest, and we always had Welsh words that were in our English. So that kind of sparked my interest in languages as well, and being able to say things in different ways. And then as I got a little bit older, I went to school and I did the sort of normal school kid thing and learning French, having little bits of lessons in different languages, songs with different languages mixed in. And as I grew up, my parents divorced and my dad remarried, and my stepmom was actually Thai. So from the age of about 8, I had this new Thai family as well, and again, new language, and so from there, I just carried on learning more and more, going on holiday, listening to kids speaking different languages, and it made me want to communicate with even more people. And eventually I went to university and studied languages, and now that's never stopped. My learning is only going to continue, and I don't think there's ever an end to it, which is a great thing.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Very cool.
Then we continue with the second question, and we were going to start with Matthew. And the question is, which technique do you consider to suit you best for language learning?
Well, my best technique that I would consider, that's kind of for me personally, is that I have put more emphasis on being able to speak more like a native, on my accent from the very beginning when speaking, and less on grammar. I actually started out with Spanish, as I said, first, and for 2 years I didn't realize there was a different accent for Spanish, and so I was taking teachers on verbling from Spain primarily for 2 years, and they also focused exclusively on grammar, and I'd literally be falling asleep in the lessons, and I decided, well, this is not fun, this is not what I want to do. I want to be able to speak the language. And so a technique that I use for improving my accent is that, for example, prior to getting into languages, I always really enjoyed watching movie stars, like interviews with movie stars, because I like to hear about their stories, right? As a lot of them have gone through struggles and become great, you know. So I decided to start doing this in all my languages. It started off with Spanish first, and I would watch interviews over and over again. Like the first one I kept watching.
Curious.
What's that?
I'm curious, which celebrity or who did you pick?
Well, so for each language, and I have to find ones for some of the newer languages, but for Spanish, it had been Antonio Banderas. Do y'all know the director Alejandro Inarritu?
Yeah.
And then Benicio del Toro from Puerto Rico. Of course, Antonio Banderas is from Spain, from I forgot the city. But and then the other one that, you know, I'd incorporated, sounds funny, for Portuguese. I love watching UFC, so some UFC fighters are from Brazil, so I'd kind of like emulate how they speak. And then one of the latest ones with French is a couple people. The primary one is, do y'all know who Marlon Brando is? Marlon Brando, super famous movie star. Of course, he passed away now.
The guest star from El Padrino.
Yes, exactly. And he apparently spoke a few different languages. He's a polyglot as well. And what's interesting with him is I got to see, he's American. I got to see from the beginning kind of how he didn't speak French very well, but he was trying to speak French. And then he gradually got better and better through later interviews. So I incorporated, I was like, oh, okay, cool. I'd listen to how he says words, right? And then, that's, I would say my primary focus has been trying to sound as authentic as possible. It's like food. I want the authentic dish. I don't want McDonald's, you know. I want the real deal, like paella or, you know, tacos al pastor. I want the real taste. So, I think that's it.
Perfect. Thank you, Matthew.
You're welcome.
So the second question to Yvonne, are you there?
Yeah, I didn't. You were gone for a second.
Don't worry.
Okay, so I mean, I'm working on a method or a technique on teaching languages. I guess for the long run, because so what we do, what kind of took me out of like learning Spanish in this like more formal settings was that I realized that there's just so much intellectual space that Spanish can move into my head, but that there was a lot of space in my free time where I didn't learn any Spanish, but that was that I thought that could be a valuable like moment in my day to actually improve my Spanish or make Spanish something that enters into my like everyday life. So even though I didn't understand anything, like very early on, I started to do all kind of classes and workshops in Spanish, and often I had no idea what they were talking about. But eventually I learned like how to say left hand and right hand and knee and leg through a yoga class. And then I started taking dance class, and I started to learn about certain movements and directions. And I took a writing class, which was the most challenging, I guess. So I guess the technique would be to just not limit yourself in the things that you can do in a foreign language, because everything you do is a learning aspect, and there is a strong like body related memory. Like we learn how to ride the bike and we never forget it, and we learn how to play the guitar and we don't forget it, even though we haven't played a guitar in 10 years. So there's a memory of corporal movements. And at what other point would you rather and better learn than when you're having fun? So actually, like for example, here in Mexico, there's a lot of like foreigners that are looking to do activities in their free time, but they always want it in English. And I think doing everything you like doing in that target language is the best way to create a different connection to the language and kind of bring it into your private sphere. So I feel like a lot of people, when they learn a language, they focus so much on grammar and on speaking, and even like on technicalities, let's say, about the language, rather than just like learning to have fun in that language, learning to bring that language into their intimacy, into their private life. And so a lot of things that we were discussing when I was still in language school here was that you kind of put on the mask of speaking Spanish, and then you leave the house, and then you're living in that environment, and then you come back home and you take off the mask and you do everything in English, or in whatever language you speak at home, and making that differentiation between learning or kind of maybe theory and practice even, I think that is a mistake. And I think the more you can make the target language or the language you're learning part of your everyday behavior, part of your hobbies, and part of your of things you enjoy doing, like the better you learn it. And also it gives you a new environment and a new vocabulary to learn it, right? Because when you dance, you need other words than when you do yoga, or when you like learn an art form, or when you learn the guitar or a music instrument. And in general, so especially in our project, we work a lot with this idea that learning a language is more like learning an art form than learning mathematics, because it's not all about grammar and rules and about repetition, but it's really about making it your own.
Okay.
Thank you, Ivan. Yes, there's also some articles that say that people who speak different languages, they have different personalities in each language. And I'm going to read this article with all of you when I send the final details of this meeting. So who else? We haven't asked this question to Richard.
Hello. So in terms of that sort of, I mean, with the question, are you kind of referring to sort of the levels that I would normally learn? Is this a standard question? For me personally,
Sorry, I did not get that.
Okay. I think there's the video is not working for some reason, so I'm sorry for that.
No, we can see
so the
you.
question that you asked, yes. So the question itself cut out when you first announced it. So could you repeat the question for me, please?
Yes, the question is, which technique do you consider to suit you best for language learning?
Which technique? Okay, so for me, I'd say that techniques vary, and it depends on my mood. It depends on what I'm doing. So the actual technique of the physical studying varies. What doesn't vary is my motivation, understanding that I am a human being, that I have different needs for different languages. So what I'm actually learning language for. And the reason that's important is because that does affect motivation. So for example, if I say to myself, I'm going to learn perfect Swahili, that's very different to saying that I'm going to learn Swahili to do a specific task. And the reason it's different is because if I study Swahili then for 1 month and look back in a month's time, I'm nowhere near speaking perfect Swahili. I am closer to being able to go to a shop and ask for the prices, order a coffee, understand the numbers, understand very specific things. So that's the very first thing that I do. I decide why I want to speak it and which level I want to get to and why I want to get to that level so that I can set myself realistic goals. And then the other thing that I do is I like to do a little bit every day. So I have 2 active sessions that I schedule that I do a week, which is where I move forward in my studies. And what I find really useful for doing that is to actually put a note in my calendar, put a time down that I do it. Instead of just saying, I'll study on Tuesday or I'll study on Thursday. If you say that you're going to study, then it's really important that you set a specific time to do it. And what I find useful is to say that you're going to do it before you do something else. If you say to yourself, I'll do this after work or after class or after whatever else, after never happens. Because what happens with after is that we end up getting tired, run over, situations change, we don't feel like doing it, and then it becomes nighttime and then it's too late and you want to go to bed and need to sleep. Whereas if you say, I want to do this before work, I'm going to do half an hour, I'm going to do 10 minutes, even if it's 10 minutes, it's better than nothing. And then you have slightly longer periods twice a week, and I'd say separate them out equally. And then between those lessons, you review what you've done. So they're the really concrete techniques that I would use for every single language. Now, in terms of actually physically learning a language, it would depend on the language. Some languages are similar to languages I already speak, and therefore it's not so necessary, for example, to work so hard on pronunciation. Some languages are going to be very difficult with pronunciation because they're got a lot of new sounds. The way of saying the words is quite different, so you'd have to pay a lot more attention to how you pronounce it to make sure what you say is clear and understandable to a speaker of that language. And so for those kinds of languages, then of course, it would be recording my voice. It would be asking for feedback on tongue position. Where is your tongue when you say a certain word? Is it a plosive sound? Is it a fricative? What kind of sound is it that you're trying to make? Where does your tongue sit? Is it at the roof of your mouth? Is it behind your teeth? Where is the air coming out? Is there a sound from your throat? Do you feel vibrations in your throat when you say that letter, say that sound? And these kinds of bits of feedback that I get from teachers, from speakers of the language, and then practicing and listening back to a native speak it, and then for me to listen to myself. That kind of thing helps for difficult to pronounce languages. Other things, like for example, grammar and vocabulary I think that it's very useful to learn things that are only relevant to what you need to know them for at the time. There's no point in me learning or saying the word urraca, for example, in Spanish, if no one knows what urraca is, or I've got no reason to say urraca. I know that word in Spanish because I like birds, but it's not the kind of word that you need to know.
I was like, what is that?
Just knowing pájaro. And absolutely.
What is urraca?
So urraca is the Spanish word for a magpie, for anybody who's listening. And it's a bird that is in English-speaking worlds, a magpie is kind of a well-known bird for stealing. It's got a lot of people know exactly what a magpie is. In other countries and other languages, just learning the same vocabulary doesn't really make any sense because it's A, not culturally relevant, and B, you'll never get to use it anyway. So stick to the things that you're going to get to use, because when it comes down to everything, what language learning really is overlearning. You learn things to the point that they become automatic. And the only way that you can learn things that they become automatic is if you're repeating them over and over again. So the kinds of things that we do repeat over and over again are vocabulary and grammatical features that we use because they fit our life. So for example, if you're in a class and the teacher says, here's a list of all of the countries, all of the languages, all of the nationalities, that's great as a reference document. But do you need to learn every single one? Absolutely not, no. If you know nobody in Uruguay and you know nobody in Vietnam, are you going to realistically learn every single one of those just in case you ever hear it at the very beginning of your studies? No. Learn them as you need them. Learn them as you go along.
Thank you, Richard. Anya, can you tell us?
Sure. Well, I agree, obviously, with a lot of things that have already been said. So I'm not going to repeat those. I think personally, for me, 2-3 things are important. First of all, what is the current level? So, for example, when I start learning a language, personally, this is maybe my cultural background. I need a structure. I need to know where I'm going with that. And also I need to have very clear goals with that, because otherwise I feel that I don't advance. And second, I think it really also depends on the language. So for example, the way I help Latinos learning German is very different to the way that I personally learn Nahuatl right now. And in general, I think obviously if you mix different methods and if you decide what's good for you, depending on your personality as well, then this is what is going to help you. But I think the most important point, or what I've observed as well the past years with a lot of language learners, it's not necessary. It's not just the method. It's more about the motivation in general. I've seen many people learn language and they just that level, or maybe even the Dutch A2 level, but then continue. So for me, it's like really about how do I stay motivated in general, especially like after having finished one level, because then, especially when you like languages, then you hear a new language and you say like, oh yeah, I could also learn that language, and then I would have maybe, I don't know, in 10 languages, I would maybe have an A1 level. But personally, as I said, my personal motivation is to be able to communicate with people. So I want to get to a very high level in the languages that I learn. And then I need to find a reason to stay motivated in general. And what helped me is, again, the connection with people, with native speakers, but also with other language learners. Both. And this is why it's so beautiful, this whole community. Laura, what you guys are doing here with those events, because this is what gives us a lot of motivation, I believe. And same for the whole Polyglot conference, everything that Richard has started over the past years. Whenever my motivation drops, I just watch one of those videos, or I just go to one of those. That the motivation drops, I think is quite normal, right? I think for all of us. And yeah, for me, it's not only about the method, because we are all different, and I think everything that has been said before, they're all right. But for me, it's really this: how do I keep the motivation?
Thank you, Anya. That was pretty interesting. I think you're right. Motivation is pretty important for learning languages and for learning anything. Right now, I'm learning to do some things with a balance board, and sometimes I leave it and then I come back and I have a great video falling down, and that's pretty fun. But yeah, so I agree with you. Carlos, do we miss someone for this question? I think we're done with these questions.
No,
okay.
Everybody answered this question. And then it's time to move to mini groups where you have the opportunity to speak more closer to the speakers, and we are going to assign each of you to a mini group.
Yes, so we're going to create 4 mini groups, 1 for each speaker, and you're going to be automatically assigned. If you want to see what's going on in a different mini room, you can come back to the main session. You have a bar in the bottom of your screen where you'll be able to pick to go back to the main room. I'll put you in the other room if you want to visit a different one. And well, that's it. So let me just assign the speakers to each mini room. So, okay. So Anya is in the same mini room as Richard, so I'm going to put you in a different one, Anya. Great. So are you ready?
Yes.
Great. You're going to be moved in a second. Don't worry. Don't be afraid. This is normal. One. Okay. Great. So I have all the mini rooms and you're going there right now. See you in a bit. Hi, Sid, you're back.
Hello, hello, hello. Yes,
how are you?
I'm good, How are you?
I'm good also. I'm bringing everybody back right now. So you're going to see people come here. You were the first one. We're going live on Facebook again for the conclusions. Hi, everybody. You are in the main room.
Hello, Laura.
Okay, so give me a second. I'm putting this on Facebook Live again.
Christina, how are you doing?
I think you were listening to me, sorry, but
No, your mic was off.
What's going on?
Nothing, just saying hi.
Nice. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again with you so you can see this. I took some picture of all of you in the mini groups because so you know what's happening in your group, and if you don't switch to a different one, then you don't know what's happening there. So I took these pictures while you were participating. We had the group with Richard, we had the group with Yvonne, we had the group with Anya, and we also had the group with Matt. So this is how you all look like while you were practicing. And now...
Okay. We were in the 4 rooms at the same time. Amazing.
Yes, I was going in the room and taking pictures of you. So, So how did it go? Anya, Yvonne, Richard, tell us a bit about how did it go?
Should I start with my feedback?
Yeah, and well, please.
I really loved it. Thank you to everyone who participated. I think we had a very interesting exchange with people from Egypt, from Nicaragua, from Mexico. I think that was very, very interesting. We talked about different languages. We talked also about German, because this is my mother tongue, and I really like helping people with German in general. We talked about how not to lose motivation. And for me, it was very interesting because in those small rooms, I also got to hear feedbacks from the people who were in that room with me, and I got to know them a little bit at least. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Perfect, Anya. Matt.
It was really cool, actually. Everybody in the group was really, really nice. It was a pleasure to meet you guys. And everyone had some really good questions that they brought up. And I really enjoyed it. There was questions that even, influenced me. I think it's important that you speak to other people to see how they're learning as well. And it can have a great influence on you with your ability to explore like new ways of learning. So yeah, it was great conversation with everybody.
Perfect. Richard.
So yeah, thank you to everyone who joined in the chat. It was really good. I've got a lot of very interesting questions. We talked about things to do with language learning, learning multiple languages, language routines, how to go about learning languages, how to set schedules, and we also got into at the very end about language Asia, with reclaiming their language ability, and also how that could compare to what happens when we learn languages, when we forget languages, where we have to focus our energies, which I thought was a really nice way to end. We talked about, obviously what that means as a language learner, or even as a monolingual, that it's quite normal, quite natural to learn vocabulary if we're not exposed to that vocabulary over a long period of time. And it was good to refresh our awareness of actually when we get into language learning, we often have unrealistic expectations of what we can and can't do, and I think that it's good to take stock of many topics and subjects that we cover at school that we don't discuss later in life, even as monolingual speakers of language, that when we want to talk about it again, the vocabulary just isn't always there, and it takes a little bit of time to get used to it. And it's the same for somebody speaking one language, and it's the same for somebody speaking many languages, and then having time and a break.
Thank you, Richard. Well, some of you were asking about Cultuur Café, so I'm going to tell you pretty fast how this works.
So yes, it's very interesting.
Language exchange, which happens almost every week on Saturdays at the same time as this event. It's web for the moment because of Corona. And when we have a Cultuur Café talk, we don't do the language exchange, but normally we do this event. We have the talks, which is this event we are participating in, where we bring speakers from all over the world to talk about a specific topic. And this time it was language learning tips from experts. And our next one is going to be at the end of June, and it's going to be about art. And we have today Fernando, who's going to be a speaker that day. And well, I hope you all like it. We're going to invite you all. And we also have experiences. This is the new thing where we also want to share with you some something special from a culture or an ability that someone has. And we had the first one, which was a salsa lesson. And now we're going to have a beer tasting session, which is going to take place.
That sounds amazing.
And we're going to send 3 beers to people's homes so they can taste them. Of course, this only applies to Mexico City. If you are from a different part of the world and you want to participate, we can create a special ticket for you. And we're also migrating to a new page. I invited some of you to some 2 events. And this is because we noticed that in Cultuur Café, everything is about culture, about languages, about meeting people from different places. And we're going to make some 2 events more about experiences. So this is why we are creating a new page, but well, you can access the events from the both pages. We'll also post everything in Cultuur Café, so don't worry, you won't miss it. And if you want a ticket for the beer tasting, please let us know, because we have limited spots available and we're running out of them. Some people who
Only 25.
have already signed up. Yes.
I'm flying to Mexico.
Yes.
Yes. It's amazing.
We're going to be tasting 3 beers. This is not working, but well, one of them is going to be cream stout. That's going to be.
Okay.
And now I want to let you tell us a bit more about what you do. You have already told us why you are learning languages, why you started with this, which have been your problems and everything. You have already told us the techniques and the tips. Now I would like you want to tell us more about Pia, her project.
So Pia, Performance Idiomas Aprendizaje is a project that evolved from my own experience as a language learner here in Mexico, and I joined forces with a theater director and an English teacher, or an expert in like English as a second language. And we started.
Sorry to interrupt you. This is funny. The theater director she partnered with used to go to elementary school with me, which is funny. We found out afterwards.
It's a very big city to find 2 people like randomly in life that went to school together. Anyhow, so we found each other about 2 years ago, and then worked on the creation of our concept and on our method for about like 8 months, until we gave our first theater and language workshop. And we continued doing that in the past. We do work with kids also, and we do specialized workshops for schools or for educational or language institutions. And we, I guess the big difference of what we do to other organizations that work with drama is that we work with applied theater, which means that our students write and develop their own play. So that's how they get really immersed in the language. Like, they need to create a character, and they need to learn to like develop this character. They work on their characteristics, like visual characteristics, but also personality traits. They learn about all these topics and the vocabulary in the target language. We develop a plot and a narrative, and then they write themselves the entire text of the play. So that's also how we build in like reading and writing, and also like focusing on wording and on vocabulary in a more detailed sense. And then at the end we give a presentation, so everybody needs to come up with the courage and to like show their final performance in front of an unknown audience. which is kind of the key aspect of our method, because like kind of losing your fear or confronting yourself with that nervousness of showing what you wrote yourself and what you created yourself, and remembering the entire text, and then standing up in front of some people to show what you've done, takes a lot of courage and a lot of it's a difficult step, and we think it's the most important aspect of what we're doing, because if you've once stood in front of 50 to 100 people that you don't know, and you showed what you wrote, and you act as a image, like as a hobby actor, or people who have never acted before, then there are very few other situations in your life that you might not be prepared for if you manage to do that. So yeah, we mainly function in Mexico City, and we teach German, English, and Spanish. Right now we created a digital program for this time period. Yeah, we actually were working on a research design to really teach languages from zero, like similar to how we learned a native language, to kind of recreate this experience in our workshops. But it's a it's a long-term project. Right now we focus more on communication skills. We work with students, I'd say, starting from an A2 level. We give other types of workshops for A1 levels, but it's more of like right now we're focusing more on helping people on communicating better and becoming more fluent, who already have a certain level of that language, and we don't teach any language from zero, but that's our long-term goal.
Thank you, Bon. I went to, I think, your very first presentation of the workshops you gave, and it was pretty good. Like a person who was there to see the whole setting and everything. There was great production, great lighting. It looked pretty professional. So I really recommend that. Now we have also Anya. You have a YouTube channel, and you have a school, Saloa Languages, and you are working on the Polyglot conference with Richard as well. We're going to leave the Polyglot conference. We have another slide for that, so please tell us now about your YouTube channel and your language school, please.
Sure. Well, we founded Zaloa about 5 years ago, and we focus currently a lot on German and Spanish, but we offer over 10 languages. And in German, we focus a lot on German for Hispanohablantes, for Spanish speakers. And so the videos on YouTube, for example, are only in Spanish, so learning German, but from a Spanish-speaking perspective. That was something that was very important to me, and that we decided actually to do this year, because before we did everything in English, because we always thought, well, yeah, everyone who wants to learn German knows at least some basics of English, right? But then again, there's like connecting with people, and I feel like whenever I help people learning German, but from a Spanish speaking perspective, because after 6 years of living in Mexico, I know what are like the hard topics, pronunciation wise also. Yeah, so this is something that I like. And then what I do in general, on Instagram, usually I show a lot about my life in Mexico, because I think that especially living as a foreigner in Mexico, I owe a lot also to this country, because I've learned so much here, and I'm still learning every day. And I mean, we all know like how the news are about Mexico very often on an international level, especially. And I think Mexico is so much more than what people see in the news, right, on TV. And so what I usually do on my Instagram channel is just showing my life living in Mexico and showing all the beautiful things, especially, so that we kind of balance this a little bit and do not only see negative things about Mexico. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Anya. That's great. Now we have Matthew. You already told us a bit about your YouTube channel last week. Well, in the last edition, Matthew was also a speaker in our talk about entrepreneurship. But tell us a bit again, please, because there's new people today.
Yes, absolutely. Well, so first of all, I do have the YouTube channel, and I have an Instagram account as well for Dream to be a Polyglot. And basically, I'll take you through like me speaking different languages to help motivate people. Some of them, like I said, I'll be, Russian or Arabic, it's speaking worse. So you get to really see the reality of going from beginner to intermediate to advanced, and also to keep it in fun with the videos. I go through different parts of my city, and I'll be speaking in different environments. So I'm not just seated in the same place always. As far as entrepreneurship, yes, my wife and I have our own business in real estate. And I've begun to have many clients from Mexico that I work with in Spanish as well. I always think it's important to have a vision for things, to create, like my wife and I will do the same thing, do vision boards for whatever it is. Like if you want to go to a different country, you want to get a house, what is your personal goals? Create the vision first and then start putting things to action. Really visualize what you want to do, but make it something fun and almost absurd, right? Like that you want to achieve. Like who could imagine speaking multiple languages, sometimes even a second language? Everybody's, would love to be able to speak a second language. So one of my visions currently is that I would really like to do a TED Talks and help motivate people. It's kind of like my grand thing. It sounds absurd. I don't know how it's going to happen, but if it does, that would be fantastic. Some other things that I'm working on is a website to help, teach people English and also to help motivate them, kind of like the YouTube channel. And then currently I've started sending out to churches to see, I kind of explained who I am to them, to see if they have, kids or adults that want to learn, so that I can also teach them, the things that I've used along the way that I've picked up from other polyglots, such as, all the, expert polyglots here. I think that it's important to show that, and then also kind of like my style or my approach to learning the language, and also to show for adults, like, look, I was 32 years old when I started learning the language. What do people always say? You can only learn languages when you're a kid. So I want to disprove that and give people motivation. It doesn't matter what your age is. I forgot his name. Maybe Richard will know. There's another famous polyglot. He's an older man. I think he started when he was like 50 or something, and now he speaks an amazing amount of languages.
Steve Kaufman?
Which one is this?
Steve Kaufman?
I think so. Older man with like white gray hair, kind of parted. Yeah. Seems super nice. So it's like there's no limit to what you can accomplish. It's only as much as you believe you can do. I really believe that. So I want to express that to people and just really motivate people to do this, because I feel like most of the, the other polyglots here can tell you, I would imagine, has really opened their world to new opportunity, to like almost having a different life. Like I think Laura maybe was the one that brought up that sometimes or many times we speak differently when we're speaking that certain language. You take on that language. And so it's almost like a play. It's something fun. So that's something that I really want to encourage people. It's like, look, this is something fun to do. And then who knows, maybe you'll get great opportunity for business as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Matthew. And
yes, you're welcome.
Richard, can you tell us a bit about your projects? We only put here speaking fluently, but if you have different projects, you can tell us about them as well.
So sure. Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me and putting on this event. I really appreciate being invited to take part. thank you to all the other speakers as well for sharing all of their experience. It's been really interesting for me to listen to as well as the participants in the group. I've really enjoyed the interactions and learning new things and hearing about the things that are important to you. So in terms of what I do, I have the Speaking Fluently channels, which are on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram mostly. I'm looking at TikTok, but I've not got very daring yet. It's still a little bit crazy for me on TikTok. Anya will know this. We had long discussions about TikTok. And the same with the Polyglot conference. The Polyglot conference is also on all of those channels, including there is a TikTok channel. There's only one video on it for both of those at the moment. Thank you for putting up that nice picture of the Polyglot Conference Global. So this year, obviously with what's happening around the world, we have a huge worldwide pandemic, and that has impacted on a number of organizations, including the organization of this event, to drive things online so that we can all still stay together. Even if we're physically apart, we're still globally connected. And that's definitely what we're looking at this year as well for the Polyglot Conference Global. It means that we'll be able to take the Polyglot Conference to many more places, to look at many more people's realities and what's facing them with language learning, with the use of language in their own parts of the world. So I think it's good to take what's happened this year, which, I mean, we are naturally disappointed not to go to Mexico again right now, because we were going to go to Cholula in October this year. But that said, that disappointment has turned into a pleasure to prepare the road to Cholula, to have an extra year for many more people to learn Nahuatl and maybe other indigenous Mexican languages as well. And it means also that we get to go back to Mexico next year for a conference and enjoy Mexican hospitality. The people are obviously wonderful, and I'm very, very happy about that. So we'll be making an announcement about the Polyglot Conference and what this means for this change on Sunday, tomorrow, at 10 a.m. Cholula time, and that is at 5 p.m. Central European time, so the time in Paris or Berlin or anywhere else in Central Europe. And we'll be doing that live on our Facebook page, on our Instagram page, and also on our YouTube channel. So we will be announcing that. You can check out all of the previous talks from previous years of conferences on our YouTube channel as well. We have them free of charge for anyone to access. There are a number of talks by a number of different people. Going through a process at the moment of updating thumbnails to make it easier to identify which talks we'd like to see. And we have them all in playlists so that you can check out years. And we will be updating the website as well soon, so that you'll be able to hopefully cross-reference them too for different topic areas. All of this will be going live in the coming weeks and months. And for me personally, since this COVID-19 pandemic hit, I started doing live chats about language learning, which anyone is welcome to come and talk, ask questions. And I do that on a Thursday at 7 p.m. Central European time every Thursday. And the Polyglot Conference has an event every second Sunday. So this Sunday, and then in 2 weeks' time, we'll have another one. And we will do that until the conference takes place in October. So all of you are welcome to join us for any of those live events, the actual Polyglot Conference as well. And we will be very, very happy to see you there. And if you're interested in talking at the Polyglot Conference event, then we encourage you to go to our website, sign up for updates, so that you can be with us for when we announce new things, and for you to be able to sign up to maybe speak as well. That would be very interesting.
Thank you, Richard. For how many years have you been organizing the Polyglot Conference?
So the conference, our very first conference, happened in 2013. which means that we're now 2020, so 7 years. So I first started organising it the year before that, of course. So it's been a fair while now. The very first Polyglot conference took place in Budapest, and I gathered 140 people who were in the language learning community at the time. We called them the Polyglot community at that time, which is why it's called the Polyglot Conference. And 140 people came over a weekend, and we had presentations on stage. It was a lot lower budget in terms of what we could afford to do with with the recordings and things like that. And you'll see as the conference goes on from year to year, so the recordings and the sound quality have improved for the recordings on Facebook and on the YouTube channel. What I would say is that whilst it is called the Polyglot Conference, what we also say is it's for everyone who loves language, because you don't need to be a polyglot to be there. In fact, some of the people I've noticed from are monolingual, and even including things about language. I have learned many things from monolingual people or people just learning languages. I find the insights very valuable, and I think that I'm not the only one who comes to the Polyglot Conference or any language event that would say that as well. Find that what we really get out of it is that interaction with different people with different opinions, the diversity that we have in our world, and the diversity of thought and the diversity of experience, because we're all we all come in different packages, and so we experience the world differently, and those differences and those different points of view and those different experiences just enrich everybody's ability to appreciate the world in which we live and the languages we use to communicate in it.
Anya, you're part of the team of the Polyglot Conference, right?
Yeah, so the initial idea was, as Richard said, to have this year in Cholula. And what Richard usually does is that wherever he goes, he has always someone, a local partner, let's say, someone who is there, because that's then obviously easier. And well, since we won't have the conference in Cholula this year, as Richard said, because a lot of people were like, "Oh, are you disappointed?" And no, honestly, I'm not, because I know that this global version is going to be amazing. And as I said before, I highly recommend everyone really to participate, to also have a look at the Facebook group and the YouTube channel, because this is exactly what we were talking about before, about this, what happens when you feel this motivation drop. And there is so many really inspiring and amazing people who are going to push your motivation. And honestly, I can't wait to have everyone in 2021 here in Cholula. I can't wait. Very excited.
Yes, that sounds really, really amazing. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Anya. Thank you, Yvonne. Thank you, Matthew, for accepting the invitation. We're also going to have a second session, language learning tips from experts, because we had more people that wanted to participate as a speaker. So we're going to have a session in the future. You can also join back if you want to participate. Carlos, did you have fun today?
Yeah, of course. I have learned many techniques and many interesting things about the process, how that our speakers took to learn languages. I think that the main and the principal thing that I have found is that the motivation is essential to learn languages, and if you are not motivated, it's difficult to get a progress into learning languages.
Yes, I think that was one important point that all our speakers talk about today.
Yeah, motivation is
So goodbye, everybody. Thanks for joining. Thank
Thank you, Laura.
World.
Thank you, Carlos.
See you,
To all
man.
the other polyglots. Nice to meet you
Thank you,
guys.
everybody.
Yes,
Thank you,
I'll send you
everyone.
an email with all the information.
okay,
Okay,
thank you.
perfect. Have a
you
great
very
weekend,
much.
guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
We'll see you in the next meeting. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Adios,
Bye.
Nina. Adios, Emilio. Adios, Yvonne. Adios, Álvaro.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Se acabó. Paro el live. Nos vemos pronto.